In 1970, in a county where most people knew your name before they knew your face, a woman walked into a produce auction with $20 in her coat pocket and walked out with something nobody else wanted. She was 22 years old. Her father had been dead for 11 days. And the men around her, men who had farmed that land for 30, 40 years, watched her load those watermelons onto her truck and shook their heads the way people do when they've already decided how a story ends. They were wrong. Lily Brown grew up on 62 acres in the Georgia Piedmont. Her father, Ethan Brown, ran goats. Not the most glamorous livestock, not the most profitable, but goats, he always said, were honest animals. They didn't pretend the land was better than it was. Ethan was not a wealthy man. He was not even, by most measures, a successful one. Not if you counted success in the way his neighbors did. New equipment, expanding acreage, yield numbers at the co-op meeting. But his farm was clean, his animals were healthy, and he carried almost no debt. That last part was not an accident. Ethan Brown kept records the way some men keep scripture, with a kind of devotion that went beyond practicality. Every input, every output, every scrap of feed, every bale of hay, every season's loss, every unexpected gain, and written at the top of every annual ledger, in his own hand, waste is a failure of imagination. It was his philosophy, his religion, almost. Nothing on the farm left without serving a purpose first. Vegetable scraps became compost. Compost became soil. Soil became food. The loop closed. The land gave back what it had been given. Lily grew up inside that philosophy the way children grow up inside a language, not by studying it, but by breathing it. When Ethan died in the spring of 1970, he left Lily the farm, the goats, the ledgers, and a checking account with $412 in it. He left her no instructions. He figured she already had them. 2 weeks after burying her father, Lily drove to the county produce auction. She needed feed supplements for the goats. She had $20 she could spare, maybe. And she had a problem she was trying to solve. The pasture had been dry that summer. The goats needed more than grass alone. She wasn't there looking for watermelons. But there they were. A farmer from 2 counties over had brought in a truckload, 40, maybe 50 watermelons. All of them past their market window. Too soft to sell at retail. Too far gone for any grocer to touch. He'd hauled them, hoping someone would take them off his hands for something. Anything. The bidding opened. No one moved. The auctioneer tried again. Still nothing. The farmer looked at his boots. And then Lily raised her hand. $20 for the lot. The men around her, she would remember this later, didn't laugh out loud. That would have been too obvious. They did something quieter and more cutting. They smiled at each other. The kind of smile that says, bless her heart. She loaded the watermelons herself, drove home and started thinking. Here is what most people thought Lily Brown bought that day. A truckload of garbage. Here is what Lily Brown actually bought. Goat feed, compost starter, and seeds. The flesh of the watermelons, sweet, high in water content, rich in natural sugars, went to the goats directly. In the dry summer heat, it was exactly what they needed. Hydration, energy, something that would have cost her 3 times as much in supplement form. The rinds, the part even the goats left behind, went into a compost pile she'd been building along the east fence line. And the seeds, she saved every one, dried them on screens in the barn, packaged them in small paper envelopes the way her father had taught her. And the following spring, she planted a test row of watermelons along the south field edge, just to see. They came in beautifully. By 1972, she was growing watermelons commercially on a 1/4 acre. By 1974, she had a standing arrangement with 2 produce wholesalers and a roadside market. All of it, every dollar of it, traced back to a $20 bid on something nobody else believed was worth the trouble. But here's the thing, and this is the part that matters most. The watermelons weren't the point. The watermelons were just the clearest example of the principle she already knew. Waste is a failure of imagination. What Lily had was not luck, not even cleverness, exactly. What she had was a way of seeing, inherited, practiced, refined, that asks a different question than everyone else in that auction yard. They looked at those watermelons and asked, what are these worth? She looked at them and asked, what could these become? That is not a small difference. That is the whole difference. Over the years, Lily's farm became something her neighbors struggled to name. It wasn't a goat farm anymore. Not exactly. It wasn't a market garden, though she grew vegetables. It wasn't a seed operation, though she saved and sold seeds. It was something older than any of those categories. A closed loop, a system. Everything the farm produced fed something else the farm was doing. The goats fertilized the fields fed the goats, the compost fed the soil fed the crops fed the family, and the market and the compost pile. And at the center of it, keeping the ledgers her father had kept, writing the same phrase at the top of every annual record, Lily Brown. While neighboring farms took on debt for new equipment, she repaired what she had. While they bought synthetic fertilizer as prices climbed year after year, she composted. While they scaled up and specialized, betting everything on single crops, single markets, single good years, she stayed small and diverse, and stubbornly, beautifully redundant. If one thing failed, something else caught it. That was the design. By the late 1970s, when interest rates climbed to historic highs and farm debt across the country became a crisis, a genuine, devastating, generational crisis, Lily's farm absorbed the blow in a way her neighbors could not. Because she owed almost nothing, and she grew almost everything she needed, people started coming to talk to her. Not just neighbors, county extension agents, young farmers from other parts of the state. A reporter from Atlanta wrote a small piece. A woman from the university came to take soil samples and stayed for a week. Lily gave everyone the same answer when they asked for her secret. I just don't throw anything away before I've thought about it twice. There are certain kinds of wisdom that only look obvious in hindsight. What Lily Brown proved, quietly, without announcing it, without writing a book or starting a movement, is that the logic of industrial farming had a flaw built into it from the beginning. The flaw was this: it treated the farm as a machine. Inputs go in, outputs come out. Efficiency is everything. Anything that doesn't produce, discard it. Anything that slows you down, eliminate it. Scale up, specialize, maximize. And for a while, in good years, that logic worked. But a machine has no resilience. A machine cannot adapt. A machine, when one part fails, stops. An ecosystem is different. An ecosystem wastes nothing because it has evolved over millions of years to find a use for everything. Dead leaves become soil. Soil becomes plants. Plants become food. Even death, in an ecosystem, is just the next beginning. Lily didn't study ecology. She didn't use that language. She just watched what her father did and asked herself, every single day, is there something here I'm not seeing yet? That question, that one humble, patient question, built everything you see on this land. Lily Brown is still on that farm. The goats are different goats now, of course, generations of them. The watermelon rows have moved and changed shape over the decades, but the ledgers are still kept. The compost pile is never empty. And the seeds, envelopes of them, carefully labeled, in a cool room off the back of the barn, go back further than most people would think to trace. Some of them come from a truckload of overripe watermelons that a room full of men decided were worth nothing. There's a version of Lily Brown's story that gets told as a farming story, about composting and seed saving and sustainable agriculture, and it is that. But it's also a story about what happens when you refuse to see the world through other people's assumptions. When you look at what everyone else has discarded and ask, not out of desperation, but out of genuine curiosity, what could this become? The answer, on 62 acres in the Georgia Piedmont, turned out to be everything. Farmland Chronicles. New stories. Every. Subscribe to follow the land.